So we're doing this forecast for September 2018, even though it's September 10th. I'm a little bit late, but I wanted to talk about the rest of the month. I'll also backtrack a little bit and talk about the first part of the month that we've already experienced. So we'll do that. And I see we already got some people here, which is cool. I'm glad people are knowing that I'll be here on Monday and Thursday. So this Thursday, I'm not sure I'll be here because I am going to a festival in the desert, Joshua Tree Festival. So that'll be nice. Maybe I'll try to have a special guest or something and try to stream live. I have to make sure that there's good Wi-Fi. I'm usually not sure because it's literally in the desert in Joshua Tree, California, which is really beautiful. So September has already started. We've already had a couple big things. When I did the update last week on Monday, I think it was, I talked about the stationary planets and the big events that were going to kick off the month, which, you know, those happened last month. Starting last week. And we'll look at the chart here and pick it up from there. But a lot of the significant things that set off the month of September 2018 began last week. That's why I just focused on those on Monday of last week, because it's so important to understand. And just to say this as well, you know, sometimes people, I don't pay that much attention to people's spammy comments, right? But there was a few comments that said, God, I can't believe you spent 20 minutes talking about stationary planets and stationary and retrograde and explaining what stationary and retrograde mean or whatever. Yes, I spent a lot of time talking about that because I'm teaching astrology. The main thing that I'm doing in my channel, this channel, and in other things is I like to teach what these things mean. So again, it's not just about your quick little forecast, your quick little prediction, and get your prediction and get Sam's prediction about this or that. I'm teaching how astrology works. That's what this is all about. That's what my work is all about. That's what it's always going to be about. And people who don't have the patience to sit through, you know, 45 minutes to an hour or something where I'm explaining a lot of astrological concepts in great detail can just go somewhere else. Other ones I've had people, they write comments, some private comments, you know, and it's like just some constructive criticism. You say a lot of things over and over again, and you spend so much time explaining things. I think it would be better if you were much more direct. But anyway, I'm just saying, for those, if you're just starting to watch this and you don't know and you don't understand my work, I'm going to be explaining things in depth. Okay, that's what I always do. And usually by the like to dislike ratio, most people understand that and they appreciate it, and that's what it is. So that's what I'm going to be doing here as well. And so that's why last week what I started talking about when I was going to do the week was I really started delving into these stationary planets. And yes, I went back in sort of exhaustive detail to show you how a planet will station at the same degree and be at that same degree for a month or so. And again, so I'm showing this, you know, to my students and to other people who want to learn and see how astrology works, right? And so this is why it's very appreciated. I want to do that for those who are interested. So just to say, that's the way I work. And I do it because I want people to learn and understand and see, and not just have astrologer talk at them, because that's not very helpful, I don't think. At least it's not what I want to promote. So that's why, if you remember last week, it was such an exhaustive examination of stationary planets and then what those planets are and what happens when they stationary, when they station. It shows time where energy is really concentrated and it feels like things aren't really moving forward. And as it relates to planets Saturn and Mars, which is what we were talking about last week, is what those planets represent. So when Saturn energy gets stuck and doesn't feel like it's moving, we feel that pressure because we want things to move forward in our life. When Mars gets stationed, things start to get frustrated, and we look for outlets to kind of blow things open and start moving forward, to have the clarity and the courage to know what we're fighting and why, what we're fighting for, and those kinds of things. And so that's why I show the sky, and I explain anything I talk about, I explain in depth. I don't like to just say things on a very surface level, because I don't think it really brings an appreciation and a curiosity about this, about the study and the practice of astrology, which we're all supposed to know. We're all supposed to understand it. And this is important because I'm also doing my certification courses right now. I'm starting them. People are registering again. It's back to school time. And that means back to school for my astrology school, right? And I've had a very successful school, popular school for years, because I've organized the classes around, easily digestible video and audio classes and courses with manuals and interaction and homework and lessons, so people can actually learn with my guidance. And so a lot of my students, show up at these, on these live videos, but also, on forums and all over the place. So if you want to really learn how astrology works, now's the time to really do it. And of course, that is part of what I'll talk about in this September 2018 forecast, because one of the big things that has shifted, as I talked about last week, we're having big shifts happen here in the next couple weeks, is Venus just went into Libra. Now we have Venus and Jupiter in Libra, which is quite auspicious. Having Venus and Jupiter in Libra, especially having Venus there, because Jupiter has already been there. So Venus, Jupiter in Libra from now until the end of this month brings a real focus on teaching, on higher learning, and really trying to understand why you're here and what you're here to contribute, what you're here to share. Libra is the sign of culture and connecting it with other people and finding that joy and beauty in the things that you love and appreciate, and of course wanting others to love and appreciate it as well. So having Jupiter in Libra with Venus lands that whole concept and that whole principle that we've been working toward and working on since last year, when Jupiter went into Libra. So Jupiter in Libra has been happening since last year, and it really showed the beginning of a lot of bringing to justice around certain types of marginalized people. In particular, in the US, we had the Me Too movement, which again, it certainly has exposed a lot of abuses of authority, of male authority throughout the decades, and the kind of landed misogyny that's still there. But you also see it around the world. We just had the LGBT gay rights victory in India, where the Supreme Court of India or the high courts of India just granted rights to, or they made it legal. They stopped making it illegal for someone to be gay or have LGBTQ rights, like extended rights to them. I don't know the full extent of the law. At the very least, it stopped making it illegal. I think that was the victory. As an example, so Jupiter in Libra has been really advancing social causes since last year, these kinds of things, especially on the personal level, and particularly as they relate to things like gender issues, sexuality, because that's what Libra is, and Jupiter is about justice. Now, Venus and there are a lot of examples of this. We recently have seen this severe backlash against the Catholic Church for the disgraceful practices of covering up priest abuse. Again, justice with Jupiter in Libra, very much a placement of justice. And also Rahu is in Cancer, which also has to do with these themes, especially as they relate to women and tolerance for people of all stripes, rather than just patriarchy and power and those kinds of things, which had to do with when Rahu was in Leo. So again, first we start with the big picture. Again, that's why some people get frustrated. I'm going to do it because we start with the big picture, right? The bigger picture things are these Mars-Saturn stations moving forward, because that's a big shift that is more than just this month or this week or this day. Even when we back up further, Jupiter in Libra goes back to last year even, and social trends that we've seen for months, if not this entire year. So again, when Venus joins Jupiter, now you're having the ruler, because Venus is the ruler of Libra. So now that the ruler is joining, that's where the real grace, power, wisdom, understanding comes from, because Libra is ruled by Venus. So we can definitely expect this month, and actually through the rest of the year, with Venus in Libra, there'll be a strong eye toward correcting those mistakes and finding solutions that are beneficial to society, rather than just having them become in the public, sphere, or have us talking about them, so that there could certainly be, for the rest of this month, we could see some more issues come forward that include indictments, both literally, like in the courts, and also just socially, or in the court of public opinion, where injustices are corrected toward higher tolerance of a universal code of respect that we all deserve and that we all want. It's very easy to not have sympathy for those who are being marginalized when you're not the marginalized person. It's very easy to just be sort of callous to immigration, those who are being mistreated through an immigration service or policy. It's very easy to just be like, yeah, that's unfortunate, but oh well, I'm just going to go on with my life, until you're the one who is marginalized. So when we have Venus go into Libra, we become more sensitive to others, not just our own plight with something that seems so far away. So we might see some of these issues come forth as well that serve to sensitize us. So with this Venus-Jupiter, we may find, especially legal verdicts, it might be a big month for legal justice. And here in the United States, we have a lot of things going on with politics and legality. I'm not going to get into so much because I don't want to kind of jump into all that, but especially with the current presidency and administration and the potential for all kinds of legal wrangling, subpoenas at Supreme Court, and grand jury subpoenas and people getting indicted and stuff like that, or all kinds of legal issues could be important for the rest of September. And if we run, this is the chart for September 10th. So if we run the chart forward, I'll just run it forward until the end and look at and notice the important shifts. You'll see Venus will draw closer to Jupiter. Venus is actually going to go retrograde. One second. Okay. So Venus will also herself start to station. So by the end of the month, Venus starts to station. Look, 14 degrees, 1408, 1432. So at this point, September 24th, Venus is going stationary. You'll see the degrees start to slow down. So on September 20th, Venus is 1248. September 21st, it's 1316. Then 1343, 1408, 1432, 1454. So it's stationary retrograde at this point. You see Venus, it's moving less than a half a degree each day by the end of the month. 1514, 1532, 1548, 1602. So Venus starts to station the last like 10 days of the month, and it doesn't turn retrograde, 32, 38, 42, 43 there. On October 6th, it actually turns retrograde, but it's stationary retrograde, which means it's like in that stuck position, but about to go retrograde from about September 24th till October 2nd. Was that the 2nd? No. Till October 6th. So September 24th until October 6th, Venus is in that stationary position. But now it's already starting to slow down because Venus usually covers about a degree per day. So even right now, September 10th, let's see. I know it's very far from the sun. Yeah, it's still moving about a degree a day for this week. But by the time we get to next week, Venus starts to slow down to about a half a degree per day. So I'm saying this because these are the end of the month as we get, especially around September 20th, the last 10 days of this month, and, really start getting into how these social issues and themes and, justice mechanisms will come forward. We may very well see a lot of those things playing out more once we get around the end, especially from September 20th until the end of the month. And so, one second here. Okay. And so notice, globally, and again, I talk about the world and I talk about social situations and dabble into politics and whatnot as well. Some people are like, oh, another update that had politics. I was hoping not to get politics. Look, we live in the world. Again, that's just who I am. That's how I am. I show things universally so that you can apply them in your life as well. If it's not legal politics in the world, or then there's politics in your life. You also work at a company where there's politics, where there's a sense of justice, where there's a sense of these things, same things I'm talking about in your work, in your social club, in your wherever it is, right? So we could, we see the same things played out on different levels. Now, again, I get that 95% of you understand this. So I'm not explaining this so that I can get skeptics or spammers or haters or trolls to appreciate my work. It's so that people understand that the macro and the micro is a great way to understand these things in your life. It's not just so that I can explain it so you can see the correlation, but it's so that you can apply it in your life and see the personal in the social and the evolutionary process that's happening. So you can see as we look through Venus moving, there are big shifts that are happening even by next week. By next week, we'll have the sun moving into Virgo. Again, Mercury is also moving very quickly, but then we have a great couple weeks ahead when Mercury, you see September 19th, we're now going to have Mercury in its exalted sign, Venus in its own sign, Mars in its exalted sign, although joined K2, of course. So this is also going to show a lot of intelligence, discrimination, communication by the end of the month. You see September 19th. Mercury is established in Virgo, 20th, 21st. So then Mercury going through these going through his exaltation sign is big. Oh yeah, someone just put Les Moonves stepping down from CBS today. That's right. There's a big consequence as well based on the sexual harassment really brought on by the Me Too movement. And again, some people, they get sick of hearing this, or they people are so antsy, they want to move on. Oh, they're still talking about that, or because maybe people, we get tired of hearing these things, or some, to some extent, because some of it is excessive or it becomes inundated or saturated. Again, it's very easy to think that. It's especially men or snarky people who don't like liberals or whatever the thing is. If you've been a woman exploited and sexually harassed at your workplace or mistreated, which most women have, then you're really glad to see this. And yes, there's been some abuses. I think some of the incidents, the problem that occurs when these things unfold is this false equivalence. Like with everything, we act like something like Bill Cosby is the same thing as Al Franken. And they're not the same thing, right? Al Franken, frankly, I think he should have resigned. Although the infraction was mild compared to, like I say, Harvey Weinstein. They're not the same thing. But again, just as a matter of what Al Franken was said to have done, I've never done anything like that. I don't care. I mean, I don't care if I'm a famous comedian or a famous this or whatever. This is, especially some of the things a lot of it was very credible about forcibly kissing a woman. I don't know. Maybe there's some suspect. Maybe some of it is suspect. I don't really know. I don't want to get too off track. But the point of the matter is, this kind of stuff is gross and it needs to end. That's all. And maybe there's some casualties when these things become finally saturated into the consciousness of culture. Maybe there are some casualties of people who did things that maybe weren't as bad, but still, it's like there's no business to be doing that. And so that all has to be thrown into the mix. We have to be intelligent about things. For instance, like Louis C.K. also, I'll talk about it a little bit because it is what's up, especially now that Venus is in Libra. It's time to talk about this maybe and revisit it and look at it with more discrimination. And that also includes these examples where we did create false equivalence and too much was made about some people. Yeah, like for instance, Louis C.K. wasn't as bad as Harvey Weinstein. It's just gross behavior. But again, I think all of them deserve the smears that they get, because I think all of it was just taking advantage of an old system and an old way of looking at women and dealing with women that needs to shift. So the fact that there might be some casualties and a misapplication of some of it somehow, that's just the way it goes. But we also have to apply discrimination to those things as well. Now, again, I'm talking about this on a macro level, on a big scale, but there's a smaller scale as well, like in your life, like maybe applying it too much and indiscriminately everywhere. And maybe not just this issue, but again, on a micro level, it has also as much to do with the Venus in your chart, how Venus works for you and your approach, and where Libra is in your chart, and how Jupiter in Libra has influenced your life in this way. Nobody knows that until they look at your natal chart, what that is. But the themes themselves, it's kind of like the Fibonacci numbers or the Chamber of Nautilus shell. It's this huge thing, but then it breaks down into a very small strand that can be clearly shown in your life. So you want to look in your life to how this random application of respect and disrespect has been a part of your life, and literally how you've also been somewhat blind to the theme on some level. Again, just to finish up this example, I've gone back and really looked in my life about how I've treated women. I don't have anything to even compare to any of that kind of behavior. And I go back and look, and to some extent, while a lot of this was going on, especially at its height, it can turn into a kind of men-hating thing. But I understand it, and I know how some men that I've known, of course, growing up, I grew up literally in the 70s and 80s, the way you talk about women or just expect that certain things are okay, and they're not okay, and we just think that certain things are okay, or treating women a certain way is okay, but we're hearing it from our point of view. This is men thinking about, it's no big deal, it's just blah, blah. But if people treat me that way, it would be a big deal to me. I would be like, that's not cool. I don't want to be treated that way. I don't want it to be expected that I should just smile my way through being mildly or overtly abused just to get along at the job, have to tolerate comments about my appearance and all that. I mean, this is something men don't have to deal with, and women have always had to deal with it. And so bringing awareness to that and clearly drawing those lines is the thing that I think has been important for all of us. And again, not just as it relates to women, but as it relates to everyone, in our life. That's been the big thing of Jupiter in Libra. Now Venus is going through, and it's a time to dial that in even more and learn how to resolve problems and conflicts more easily. So this month of September, there's a lot of that. In addition, Jupiter is finishing up his transit. Well, let me finish up with Mercury. So again, Mercury enters Virgo, his own sign, on September 19th. So from September 19th until the end of the month, we will be benefiting from a very powerful Mercury exalted as well. So when Mercury is exalted, our thoughts become much more clear. Things become more detailed and organized. And we're not so scattershot. One of the biggest sources of confusion for the last several months is the disposition of Mercury. It's been kind of brutal to some extent because Mercury's been in Cancer. It was retrograde with Rahu, eclipsed, aspected by Mars. Then it goes into Leo, where it's really fast and it's also kind of sharp and impatient. So on September 18th, September 17th, he goes in, then September 18th. So by this time next week, Mercury will be going into the in his exaltation sign, which is about being thoughtful and organized and communicating with more integrity and with more responsibility and, being thoughtful and careful in what you say and understanding what it means and all of that. And so that will be really important because we haven't had a good head on our shoulders in this regard with a lot of discrimination for several months. And so trying to intellectually navigate the confusion of the world has been harder with Mercury so discombobulated. So there's that big shift September 18th with Mercury going into Virgo. So then as you see, as we get to the end of the month, look at the degrees of Jupiter. Jupiter then starts moving towards Scorpio. So again, this month is really the month where Jupiter also finishes up his transit, and that Jupiter in Libra cycle is finishing. It's waning now. So again, you can really look at Jupiter cycles as the sort of 1 year cycle of hope and awareness around, and a sense of justice around certain issues and themes. And that sense of social justice for like 1 year, because Jupiter goes through a sign for 1 year. So it's about a year. So Jupiter going through Libra, starting last September, really raised the issue, raised the awareness of these things I talked about. Very much about social justice in many ways, but we really saw it in issues and themes that have to do with like women's rights, sexuality in general, abuse of children, misusing authority and in an unbalanced way, like the priest sex scandal, definitely Jupiter and Libra kind of thing as well. Raising awareness to the issue, bringing about social consequences for doing those things. Now, again, a lot of the consequences and those sorts of things come from other planets like Mars, the Sun, Saturn. But Jupiter is what brings the issue into the consciousness so that we're aware of it and we can see and we get expanded and educated about that thing. He's the guru, the teacher. So we could see that by early October, again, all right, that's October, what's the date? 12th. So then October 12th, about a month from now, is when Jupiter formally enters Scorpio. I'll do an update on that in due time. But Jupiter entering Scorpio will now expand our awareness and knowledge of that sort of darker, scary, even potentially paranoid quality of life where we are trying to illuminate the darkness in our imagined fears and the secrets being told to us. And hopefully, I think it's going to help us unwind a lot of these nonsensical conspiracy theories and stuff that we have that we're really experiencing now. I brought the screen back up, but you can see Jupiter moving into Scorpio here, October 12th. I meant to have the screen up. Sorry about that. So the rest of this month is also finishing, like for the next month, we're finishing that Jupiter and Libra transit and moving into Jupiter and Scorpio. So you might really see a shift in the focus and emphasis on bringing out the issues to a sense of being held account for these things. because Scorpio is much more about being held to account for them, you would say. It's ruled by Mars. And Jupiter in Scorpio is actually quite a congruent placement, because Jupiter in Libra is a little out of its element, because again, Jupiter is about big things that are beyond this earth, and in many ways often things that are spiritual and conceptual. And Libra is very social. So again, this is why it's hard for us. There's often so much contentiousness around bringing justice into social issues. Even with the courts. The courts are very much a kind of social application of justice. Justice in many ways, in its highest sense, is a universal concept. It's related to dharma. There is a sense of truth. That's, and I'm not talking socially, I'm talking about truth, like the truth of who we are and why we're here and who you really are. And spiritual truth that demands truthful action and practices and all of that. That's the real truth. That's the higher truth. That's the real truth that Jupiter is concerned with, and that Mars is concerned with, and that the sun is concerned with. But then we come in this world of people, and then justice and truth become relative. In order to get justice, you go into a court of your peers, and a lot of people sitting there deciding what's just in this world and what's true. That's a whole other equation to when we talk about what's just and true in a dharmic sense, a sense of dharma. In that way, justice and truth are very different, because we know what's true and we know what's right, and we have to do it and put it into practice. And that's what Jupiter is really out to show us. And of course, in many ways, we learn that by making mistakes socially and with other people and whatnot. We come here to the earth interacting with other people. And a lot of the ways that we learn whether or not what we're doing is true and just is by having other people reflect back to us certain things. But the point is that once Jupiter leaves Libra, its energy is much less clogged up in all of the relativistic truth, the sort of fake news, the sort of, alternative facts, my truth, this truth. Again, not that that's wrong, but there's also a collective truth. We used to agree on a collective truth. And as I've talked about quite a bit in the last few months, one of the biggest problems in the world is people can't even agree on a consensus truth. Even when you see someone, for instance, stand there and lie to your face and say something that's provably and objectively a lie, it doesn't matter. Well, because it's on CNN or because of this, maybe it's fake news. Well, so what that this person is lying? Other people do too, so I'm not going to pay attention to this. They all lie, or this or that. We dismiss like what we can see right in front of us. One shouldn't cancel the other. Because they all lie doesn't mean that the one lying right now is somehow forgiven or excused or dangerous, or is not dangerous. So again, these are the kinds of things that happen when we get into this relativistic, everything is relative, everything is equivalent, this false equivalence that's huge in our world now, because a lot of things, I don't want to get so into that, but we see a lot of it now. And Jupiter going into Scorpio, which is where he's heading, is going to, I think, really pull out and expose a lot of those issues. And by the way, we're already seeing some of it even in the news and in the society and in the culture and even in our social interactions, in our social media. Again, I don't want to get political. It shouldn't be that controversial, but for some reason it is really controversial that things like some of the people online, like, for example, Alex Jones getting banned, and some of these social media companies having more responsibility to their, to most of the people that watch them, to not allow people. It's one thing to go on and have your opinion. It's another thing to be dangerous and to incite or go right up to the edge of inciting violence and doing all kinds of other things. And, just to be able to serve an open platform really kind of violate everybody else's rights to not be attacked in the public sphere. And we tolerate so much of this now, so much of social media, which is a lot of the ways we interact right now, is poisonous with really no consequences for people, as I've said, making anonymous profiles and showing up and just burning somebody with no consequence because there's no name attached, or just venting and ranting in a very mild form of social media abuse, but in a very large way, inciting social changes and inciting people to actions. And so we've even seen that accountability now with someone like Alex Jones being banned from all the social media platforms, which I think is good. He did, and again, the false equivalence and the misnomer of saying that that's censorship. It's not censorship. Again, one of the problems too is we don't bother to become educated or actually learn what's going on. We learn things in this simplistic way, which makes us subject to propaganda. When people don't really understand the laws, then a demagogue goofball like Alex Jones can demagogue the issue and say, censorship, they're censoring me. No one is censoring him. He still has his website. Go make your videos and post them on your website. Now, your web hosting company could censor you if you violate their terms of service, but Facebook and YouTube and Twitter didn't censor him. They have terms of service. Alex Jones has terms of service on his website. Alex Jones is violating his own terms of service with the way he acts on these social media platforms, because he says that he could ban anyone at any time for abusing people, for doing the very things that Alex Jones does all the time on his website terms of service. He said that he reserves the right to ban anyone at any time for any reason for doing anything close to that. And he does it all the time. So it's not censorship. Censorship is a legal term of the government censoring you. It's not censorship for a private company to say, no, you can't abuse the people on our platform. So it's about time that happened. I'm talking about this because this is the kind of social justice I'm talking about. This is different than Jupiter in Libra, where, again, everybody is in this kind of relative application of justice where no one's thinking straight about it and saying, wait a minute, that's different. When Jupiter goes into Scorpio, it's again, there's a more clear and sensible application of justice. Scorpio is ruled by Mars. It's like, yeah, that's true. And we're willing to get down into the dirt and think about these things more clearly, often because we have to deal with some hardship that forces us to do it. And we look at issues on a more visceral level because we have to. By the way, someone said hypocrisy on Alex Jones' part. Of course it is. Of course it is. He's constantly complaining that he's being censored, and he does the same thing, or that he's being shouted down. All he does is shout people down all the time. I don't want to go on about him because I used to find him pretty entertaining. And by the way, in his early career, Alex Jones actually did some very important investigative journalism. I'm talking about things like about the gathering in the Northern California, I always forget what it's called, but there are videos of him exposing this club of politicians that get together every year, actually in Northern California, and burn these effigies and all this crazy stuff. And he snuck in, and in his early days before he got famous, I guess you would say, he did some very interesting investigative journalism. And even mildly between then and now I think he's just lost his mind or something. I don't know. But, when it's very obvious when you see him that he's just peddling in stuff that, aside from his opinions, that's not what got him banned. What got him banned is inciting violence and numerous lawsuits against him for these kinds of things. And demagoguing the issue, people have to say that if we're informed, we see right through it. Like it's never been confusing to me whatsoever that anybody can get banned at any time if you violate the terms of service. I could get banned on YouTube if I start threatening people. I've had videos pulled because I inadvertently violated a term of service. 3 violations of the terms of service of YouTube and you're banned. And that doesn't even include things like threatening people. Just because of certain, mainly copyright things and legal things, these companies don't want to be on the hook for someone getting killed, because it could very well be that somebody listens to Alex Jones' video, goes out and kills somebody, and YouTube could be part of a suit for giving him the platform, and it's legitimate. These platforms have responsibility. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, they have a responsibility to not just allow anyone to come on and say anything. So again, that's the point. And we've gotten so relative with social media and with the way we consume that we stop looking at these things objectively. And instead someone can, Bohemian Grove. Thank you. Bohemian Grove. I should have known Matthias would show up and say it. Yes, Bohemian Grove. But we've gotten so dumb and numb intellectually that anybody can come out and say, censorship, they're censoring me, they're taking away your rights, now they're going to take away your rights, they're coming for me, then they're going to come for you. It's nonsense. He's an idiot. These companies have every right, just like you don't see him on mainstream TV, because TV is regulated by the FCC. They will not share their airwaves with someone coming out saying that kind of nonsense. Anyway, so to move on, but it's important to understand because we're in the throes of this stuff now. And it's not unrelated to what I've been saying for the last couple months either, with Mercury this whole summer going through this place where it hasn't been very powerful in the sense of separating these things and having a lot of discrimination about these things. And so we're experiencing a shift from Jupiter moving into Libra to moving into Scorpio, where perhaps because of some event where something like this might happen. And again, we can also go back to the big thing that's been dominating the news as well as it relates to social media, and that's all of the changes that have happened, especially like with Facebook and whatnot, about them influencing our election and using Facebook and their as a legitimate platform to spread propaganda. And anyone who lived through the 2016 election knows that was going on and knows that it was effective and knows that so much of it, the things that we've actually seen now have been shown to be part of that operation. We all saw those ads. So anyway, this is the last couple of years of Jupiter going through Leo, Virgo, Libra. So when it goes into Scorpio, which is where it'll be for a year, starting in early October, perhaps there could be some big consequences that make us like pass laws and regulations and standards that are similar to what we have in public government regulated spaces like on TV and whatnot, because the internet is not regulated that way. Believe me, I hate this kind of stuff. I hate the idea of regulating things like the internet because it could affect me. And I'm very nervous about this. FCC, they passed net neutrality. It's a terrible law. Putting all this power in the hands of the media companies, the cable companies, right? So again, it's dangerous. And again, Jupiter going through Scorpio, we're going to be bringing a sense of social justice that could skew toward paranoia and all kinds of things. This is the part we have to be careful of socially, personally and spiritually and whatnot. Jupiter and Scorpio is very good for getting clear about these issues and what's actually true internally, and the vulnerabilities that we need to manage and face. So this is kind of a crossover from the rest of 2018, from the rest of September 2018 to moving into October 2018 with Jupiter moving in Scorpio. Again, this is a bigger shift that's happening for the rest of this month start to look and see how these things skew. Here in the US, we're having the hearing for another Supreme Court justice. We're having it in the midst of all kinds of really kind of chicanery with Republicans in Congress who won't release the documents. They really rushed it through. Usually these things back in the day, and I remember when many of the current Supreme Court justices were approved, it took months. It took at least about a month or 2 months. You had ample time to look at their writings. This is getting jammed through because the Republicans in the US Congress know that we have an election and we have a president who has been named as an unindicted co-conspirator in federal lawsuits. Anything could happen with him. Nobody knows. So this whole thing is teeter-tottering on the abyss of craziness on some level. Again, Jupiter in Libra, now it's joined Venus. So I wouldn't be surprised if something blows up the Kavanaugh nomination. It wouldn't surprise me at all, as Venus gets more established in Libra, if something comes to derail it, because I don't think it's been just at all. It hasn't been the way things have normally happened. It's not standard procedure. We're here now to have this kind of railroading of a nominee. And plus he's been terrible in the hearings. He doesn't answer any questions. It's just really bad. And so I wouldn't be surprised if a sense of justice comes out of the blue, and very surprisingly, where maybe something emerges about him that hasn't been brought to the public yet, where he has to withdraw. It could very well not happen, but it wouldn't surprise me if it did happen, just because of Venus bringing a sense of justice into the situation, because I don't think it's been just at all. By any standard, it hasn't. The Brett Kavanaugh nomination. So that might be an interesting thing that gets, that shakes up the landscape and throws some things into chaos. But besides that, the rest of the month, if we go through, you see the moon is going to be going through this section of the sky for this week, September 13, 14, 15. So literally this whole section, especially from the 15th until the 20th, there's a lot of that intensity because we have a debilitated moon, and then we have the moon with Saturn and then Mars and Ketu. So 15th through 20th, we could see some real, some things really shaken up. We could see some unexpected events that might revolve around some of the things I'm saying right now. There's some later this week, September 12th, 13th, 14th, 12th and 13th especially, could be very auspicious to these kind of social themes and personal themes that I'm talking about, with Moon, join Venus and Jupiter. And so for this week, September 12th and 13th are really good days for looking into, planning something auspicious and powerful September 12th and 13th this week, which will be Wednesday and Thursday. Especially if you're a teacher, if you're putting on any classes, any courses. I'm going to be in the desert at those times at Bhakti Fest in Joshua Tree. Yeah, Matthias is talking about shady, corrupt science in the vaccine business, all kinds of pharmaceutical businesses. Yeah, so there's all kinds of shady, corrupt businesses that could come out. It's actually a good point, especially Jupiter and Scorpio, because Scorpio also has to do with things that relate to like drugs and medication. So maybe we'll see some of that come out as well. Kelly asked, does the moon break the Kalasarpa? It does when it does it. But if you're going to look at Kalasarpa, then you're reading the Kalasarpa with all the planets in between it, not with the moon anyway. So if you're going to read it that way, then read it when the moon gets outside of it. It's like everything else. If you're just trying to attach Kalasarpa yoga and say, is it still defined as that? Then it's just kind of, you're just playing word games. If it's defined when all the planets are there, right? If it goes outside, then it's not defined that way anymore, but all those planets are still there. Yeah, I don't want to get into the vaccine issue. That's definitely a controversial one. So again, what's important if you're looking at Kalasarpa yoga with transits is not really the moon so much. It goes outside because it's always going to go outside of it every 2 weeks. But again, as I've explained with Kalasarpa yoga, you just have to explain it. If you're explaining it, then the moon is outside of it as part of the explanation. I don't know who Max Spears is, and I'm not going to talk about it. Okay? So if you want to talk about it, talk about it. All right. So, and so, as I said, the September 15th through the 20th, we have those planets in between. The moon is either debilitated or it's with Saturn or it's with Ketu and Mars. So for those, actually through the 21st, 15th through 21st, there could be some intense stuff going on in the world and personally. That's definitely the case. So gear up for that. It's been like that for the last couple, several months. As soon as Mars went into Capricorn, we had that. And so then as we get around the end of the month, the last week or so, again, Mercury is very well established here now in Virgo. So we have a lot of things will shift again by this time next week when Mercury goes into Virgo and starts to really bring more intelligence and discrimination around how we deal with each other and how we speak and communicate and all of that. The nature of Mercury in Virgo brings more discrimination, and we are more thoughtful. So if you're like editing, it's very good for editing. It's very good for organizing things. And again, we don't realize how much we've missed it because of Mercury being in Cancer and now Leo and being eclipsed and all that. But the last several months, it's why it's been hard to stay focused and keep your head on, and literally like your intellectual head, your head of discrimination and communicating things. And that's fine. Someone said apologies for asking about the Max Spears. I just don't know who it is, and I see you keep asking, so I don't know who it is. So if you want to say who it is at some point, you can do that, and maybe I'll look at it. So around the end of the month, September 20, we have this full moon will be happening on September 24th. So of course I'll do full moon videos and updates at that time, and it'll be the full moon in Pisces, right? And that full moon in Pisces is going to help us, connect with a much more metaphysical way of seeing things instead of being so in the world. So it should be a good shift. We need to connect with that which is beyond the world. And when we have the full moon in Pisces, especially, it's gives us that higher perspective. It'll be in Uttar Bhadrapada Nakshatra. So I'll look forward to sharing that with you. That'll be on September 24th. And then the end of the month, September 27, 28, we have this aspect from Venus and Jupiter onto the moon. And again, Venus starts to slow down. So these energies start to really concentrate. So it could be it could be transformative for your relationships and your romantic interactions this whole month, because Venus is wanting to bring integrity into our romantic partnerships. We may be looking, or we will be looking at how much we're appreciated and how much we're respected and all of that. And of course, many times we don't feel respected and appreciated and honored so much, but we really notice it once Venus goes into Libra and then joining Jupiter. Again, they're unfriendly with each other on the personal level for sure. And they can be in the legal level too, as we're seeing legal wrangling and a sense of justice that becomes very relative. But the reason they're at odds somewhat personally is because, again, Jupiter wants that sense of justice. And Venus wants fairness, Venus and Mercury. And as we all know about relationships, they're never just and they're never fair. We want them to be equal, but they're never fair. It's never fair. It's two unfair situations that both people have to learn to agree to engage in. It's never going to feel fair or equal or just. That's not a criticism. It's just that's not what we're learning. We're actually learning how to stay connected to something even though it's not fair or just. And sometimes, and most of the time, doesn't inspire us. It's actually why we need to find something bigger to be in a relationship for. We have to find something bigger. We have to find that. That's why often children keep us in partnerships, which is a Jupiter thing. And also God and higher philosophy, that keeps us in a relationship. So Venus and Jupiter have a difficult relationship with each other, but they also, especially Jupiter, needs to be part of a successful marriage or relationship, because it'll break it. Often relationships break up because of the Jupiter thing, because where are we going? What's the big picture? What's the point? Oh, children? Okay, then we'll stay together and work through this thing that feels unfair half the time, most of the time. Okay, now we've done that. The children are grown. Now why are we together? Well, I don't know. And the relationship ends. Then it's something else that's higher, like usually some shared value system, philosophy, belief. Because after the sex wears off and the attraction wears off, then you have to find some other reason to be together. And that other reason, that meaning, comes from Jupiter. So, especially for the rest of September, there could be quite a bit of that where we're now saying, what's the point? Why are we together? Are we moving toward getting married? Are we moving toward this? What do we do to help us get through things? Well, I don't know. And the relationship works when it feels like two equals. And when they're involved, they feel like they can be themselves. And even when they can be themselves and the other person doesn't like it, they can argue or fight about it, but still come back to a place where there's honor and respect, even though two people might know they may never agree about this. They're always going to disagree. They still respect the other person, and something about it makes it worth being together. And it's usually that other thing that keeps the relationship going. Otherwise, you'll often see people break up and just become friends, unless there's some other bigger reason to keep staying together. So we're about to go through a whole lot with this, because Venus is going to be retrograde in Libra and all that. It's going to be in there until January of next year. So I'll talk more about Venus and Libra actually really soon. But on September 27th and 28th, September 27th, 28th, we have Moon join Venus, Jupiter. I'm sorry, the Moon aspected by Venus and Jupiter opposite, and it's in Aries. So the end of this month, there could be some real fireworks as well, for sure, as Moon in Aries is opposite Venus, Jupiter, and it's right after the full moon. So caution around this full moon time as well. And as we get around that full moon, you'll see that you might have some blow-ups. It could be a full moon that's hard on relationships. Many of them are hard on relationships because we have that big opposition there. So it's always good that you have something else to do in your life besides your relationship, that you have work that you care about, other things that you love, because relationship is going to not be the meaning of your life. If it is, then you need to find something bigger, because that partner, that person is not going to satisfy that thing that you're looking for, that big purpose, that God thing that you want to bring into your life. It's not. And it's fine for what it does bring into your life and what it teaches you. And it's great to help you focus and to put into practice those other things. But I'm saying the partner itself, when people wrap their whole identity and their whole sense of meaning and purpose in their partner or whatever, it's just a recipe for disaster. And so that's the end of the month. So I hope this was helpful to kind of get clear in the rest of the month about what's going on and the big energies. Rather than make it be each day and go through each day, I wanted to talk more about the larger issues and show how some of them have been, how they've been showing up, and then how they're going to be moving into the next phase, perhaps. Consciously avoiding any politics with Trump or any of that, because it's just too much. Okay, so I don't know about Max Spears. Maybe I'll look at it. A conspiracy theorist, his death caused controversy, because in the conspiracy theory community. Okay, I don't know. We're so inundated with conspiracy theories now, and most of them are just total fiction. And people see, I'll say this last thing about it, because this is a part of what we're doing, is bringing justice and bringing hopefully some common sense into these things. What I've noticed, because I've been looking at these things, what people now call woke, and people who now, because they understand that there's a thing called the Federal Reserve and international politics, and that things aren't what they seem, and they realize that everything coming through the TV isn't what they're being told, because they just now realize this in the last, 5 years or so. They now believe every conspiracy theory that comes down the pike, and with no discrimination, no understanding of how things work. And it makes people dupes. Most people that just buy every conspiracy theory are just being duped. And the thing is, again, and I'm just going to talk about myself like I'm some whatever, like I'm some great genius, but I've been studying and aware of these things since the mid 80s of the fiat capital, the Federal Reserve, you want to call it conspiracy theory around Kennedy investigation, or Kennedy assassination and what he was about to do in the Fed, and the interconnections, all the stuff people can say about the Rothschilds and the this and the that, all the way over the cliff with David Icke and lizard people and reptile people, and from the good to the bad to the Federalist Society and Bohemian Grove. I mean, all of it for 20 years. So the point is that no, things aren't what they seem. But when people get this whole idea that things like with the Pizzagate and the stuff you'll see on 4chan, and this is just so ridiculous that people believe everything, or at least they give license to all of it. And it's probably just like QAnon. This is probably a 16-year-old kid having a ball, putting people on. And I mean, there is nothing to this stuff. And again, so when we talk about conspiracy theories, or even like everything's a conspiracy theory, like the entire apparatus of, the entire world has drawn together a conspiracy to prove that the earth is round when it's actually flat. For example. Now, again, that seems ridiculous to most people. But to me, it doesn't sound as different as many of these other conspiracies, most of them, with nothing backing any of it up. I don't want to go off the cliff with the politics, but I'm just saying, from my point of view, I've known that these things have been going on forever. That's always been the way it is. And now, because things are so corrupt, and they're corrupt by, because of a very specific couple of things, mainly money. You can find the reason very easily. Money and politics, some profit motive, turns everybody into shady characters. And again, so finding the root cause of things is much simpler than some elaborate, constant conspiracy theory where everybody you can think of is somehow involved on this elaborate scheme, when you can't keep the lid on anything these days. It just doesn't make any sense. So, what I see now is what I've been addressing more directly, which is saying that we don't have any relative truth anymore, because any conspiracy theory is held in the same regard as absolute things we can see with our own eyes, or even things like 5 government agencies with so much resources, so much information, so much forensic data, so much ability to find the correct answer with every reason to do it, with oversight, redundancy that would expose any corruption and lies very easily. All of that is, I don't know, this fake news because somebody says something, dismisses all of that with nothing to back it up. And I know there are people who are saying this thing, or who are hearing this thing, "Oh, Sam, you're just so naive," and then get into talking points like as it relates to politics. This is the problem. So we need to get back to a consensus reality, which is not happening. We're spun out. So I'm hoping that a lot of this, hopefully with Mercury being exalted and getting, restoring some intelligence and some discrimination, Venus also in Libra, which is also bringing some intelligence on a personal and cultural level around some hypocrisies that we see being exposed. And then when Jupiter goes into Scorpio, I think we're going to see, again, some real accounting and some hard truths coming out that exposes this BS, that exposes the people who benefit from all these stupid conspiracy theories. We'll see hard evidence, and it'll get harder and harder to deny what's going on. Like when people start going to prison and confessing to crimes, you can throw your conspiracy theory out the window. People are not going to go to jail to protect a conspiracy theory. It's because there's a crime and there was proof, and that's it. And again, it gets harder. There are always going to be people that wind up believing that, which is a very small majority. Very small minority. But now way too many people buy into that stuff, or the possibility. And things like hard evidence, forensic data, people confessing, going to jail, going down because of proof of crimes, will start to strip the veil of all of that and make it like, yeah, okay, we've kind of gone a little cuckoo for the last few years around this stuff, and we need to get back to what is obviously true. Otherwise, everything is just going to keep sliding in a million different directions, and it's very dangerous. So that's my rant at the end. That's the part that'll get me all the spammers, all the trolls. Oh, you're just a whatever. Who knows? Anyway, so glad to see people came, and had a chat about what's going on. And I'll see what's going on for Thursday. I'm not sure. I'll try to do an update from Joshua Tree in the desert. And hopefully that'll be something that will be cool. It's a beautiful area. And yeah, so, amidst all of this stuff that I talked about at the end and in the world and whatnot, all of it's what it's supposed to be. It's what it's supposed to be right now. This is what we're supposed to be dealing with. And underneath it all, we're here to find the self and stay in, like I've said before, the world is no different than it's always been. It's always been some version of this. Now, because we're so connected, everything is so interconnected, we just see it. We just see it. Well, we have to be careful that just because we see it and we see so much and we see so much of each other's ideas, that we don't stop using our discrimination and our common sense, because that's just as much a part. That's the thing that gets exploited. See, people that want to exploit us don't want to teach us something. They want to confuse us. They want us confused. They want us confused. Because if they're confused, then we're just fighting with each other instead of coming to a consensus reality where we become empowered. And that's on the social level, which this whole world is going to disappear anyway one day. On the cosmic or on the universal spiritual level, nothing is untouched. Nothing is touched by this. So staying with our practices, doing a yoga and meditation, spiritual practices, that's always the royal road. That's the highest teaching and the highest dharma. So I hope this was helpful. It all leads to dharma. It all leads to truth if we do the practices.